The early 19th century was a time of immense change in Russia, marked by a flourishing cultural landscape and a growing passion for music. It was during this vibrant period that a young Irish-born pianist and composer, John Field, arrived in Russia, leaving an indelible mark on the country's musical identity. As Russia's cultural scene began to blossom, music became not just as an art form, but a vital part of the social fabric, embraced by both the aristocracy and the emerging middle class. Field's concerts quickly captured the imagination of Russian audiences, renowned for their lyrical style and deeply impressive performances. His compositions, especially the nocturnes, introduced a fresh wave of emotional depth to the piano music, blending Western influences with the distinctive flavors of Russian folk traditions. As Russia's cultural scene began to blossom, music became not just an art form, but a vital part of the social fabric, embraced by both the aristocracy and the emerging middle class. Field's concerts quickly captured the imagination of Russian audiences, renowned for their lyrical style and deeply expressive performances. His compositions, especially the nocturnes, introduced a fresh wave of emotional depth to the piano music, blending Western influences with the distinctive flavors of Russian folk traditions. These works struck a chord with the public, paving the way for future composers and future enriching the Russian musical repertoire. As Russia's music scene continued to evolve, it was shaped by profound social and cultural changes. The rise of public concerts, the shift from aristocratic patronage to more accessible musical experiences, and the growing popularity of the piano as a fixture in the home all contribute to the blossoming of music across Russian society. The concert hall became a place of vibrant exchange where performers and audiences engaged in a shared enthusiasm for new artistic trends. In this transformative moment, John Field's contributions was pivotal, setting the stage for the development of a distinctive national musical culture, one that would resonate through the decades to come. The early 19th century in Russia was in many ways the birth of a new era in music, where sound and society intertwined, shaping the future of the nation's artistic landscape. In the early 19th century, Russia experienced a cultural renaissance profoundly influenced by the flourishing of salons. These gatherings, often held in lavish drawing rooms of the aristocracy, became the heart of Russia's intellectual and artistic life. Salons served as vibrant venues where people from diverse social backgrounds mingled and exchanged ideas on literature, music, and the arts, thereby playing a crucial role in shaping the cultural landscape of the period. Music was a central element of salon culture, with performances by eminent artists like the Irish-born pianist John Field, whose appearances became highlight events. Field's lyrical compositions and masterful piano skills won him widespread acclaim and adoration from salon attendees. These gatherings helped forge a romantic style that came to define much of the music of this era. Furthermore, these gatherings allowed the elite to demonstrate their cultural sophistication, enhancing their social standing. The presence of notable patrons, celebrated artists, and leading intellectuals added to the prestige of the salons, affirming their status as essential institutions in the cultural hierarchy of Russian society. The establishment of the first major musical salon dates back to 1816, founded by Vygotsky brothers, Mikhail and Matvey, who were well-known figures. They were aristocrats. Their father had served as the Polish ambassador to Russia during the reign of Catherine the Great. After switching to Russian service, he remained in Russia until his death. Being a skilled musician himself, he provided his sons with an excellent musical education. The Vygotsky brothers' salon, established in Moscow in 1823, and relocated to St. Petersburg in 1826, was highly esteemed for its performance of exquisite music, playing a significant role in the cultural tapestry of Russia's musical art. The Salon of the Veligorsky brothers became a gathering place for outstanding composers and performers, whom the brothers selected with great discernment. Over the years, many of these artists first made their mark in the Salon, where they were introduced to other key figures in the musical community. This exposure often led to invitations to perform at the royal court or to participate in public performances, thereby launching or enhancing their careers in the broader musical scape of Russia. The Salon not only showcased their talent, but also served as a crucial networking hub, fostering connections that propelled the Russian music scene into a vibrant era of artistic achievement. Vladimir Ordoyevsky often attended musical evenings, and he was particularly fond of those held at the Veligorsky household. He once remarked, describing the activities of Mikhail Veligorsky's circle in his article A Look at Moscow in 1824, Vladimir Ordoyevsky also writes, Count Vladimir Sologub reflected in his memoirs, composer Hector Berlioz referred to the Veligorsky's family's home on Mikhailovskaya Square, which could accommodate an orchestra, as, quote, a little ministry of fine arts. The Salon on Mikhailovskaya Square hosted performances by illustrious artists such as Bernard Romberg, John Field, Franz Boehm, Clara and Robert Schumann, Franz Liszt, Hector Berlioz, Paulina Verdot, Sigismund Thalberg, and many others. The Salon thrived for over 40 years, becoming a cornerstone of cultural life and a symbol of the rich musical heritage of St. Petersburg. While the contributions of the Veligorsky brothers to the musical life of St. Petersburg were often highly regarded, the system in which a single dilettante held a dominant position in the musical scene had its clear drawback. This interplay of patronage and artistic freedom highlights the complex dynamics of cultural life in Imperial Russia, where the support of influential figures could both nurture and restrict the creative community. In conclusion, it must be acknowledged that the creative and enlightening activities of the literary musical salons of the 19th century were largely imitative, heavily drawing on the Western European model of cultural development. These salons predominantly adopted French traditions, which shaped both the artistic content and intellectual practices. Given that the circle of musicians visiting St. Petersburg and Moscow included some of Europe's finest instrumentalists, singers, and composers, these Russian connections should be viewed as an integral part of European musical life. As such, they tell us how, in a changing musical world, an autocracy could remain an attractive place. This cultural interplay not only facilitated the dissemination of European musical traditions within Russia, but also allowed Russian aristocratic life to enrich and influence the broader European cultural milieu, demonstrating the global interconnectivity of the arts during this era. Thus, the salons of the early 19th century were not just settings for entertainment, but vital incubators for creativity and discussion. They played a significant role in the emergence of a rich Russian aristocratic milieu, influencing the development of music and the broader cultural identity of the nation. The arrival of Muzio Clementi and John Field in Russia marked a significant moment in the landscape of Russian music. In 1802, Field, a young pianist and student of Clementi, arrived in St. Petersburg, where he would eventually establish himself as a prominent figure in the musical community. The initial impressions of the city were mixed. While Field was captivated by the potential for artistic growth, he also faced the challenges of adapting to a new environment filled with harsh winters and cultural differences. Clementi, already an established composer and pianist, had a vision for promoting music in Russia and saw great potential in Field's talent. Their arrival coincided with a burgeoning interest in music among Russian aristocrats, setting the stage for Field's future success as a performer and composer. Field's deep emotional expressiveness and lyrical style resonated with Russian audiences, who were drawn to his performances as he played not only Clementi's works, but also his own compositions. This is what the composer Louis Spohr recollects in his autobiography when he was traveling in Russia.
In St. Petersburg, I was at first quite left to myself. This would therefore have been the most favorable opportunity for me to look around the splendid city. For a member of the Imperial Orchestra, we were introduced into the Citizen Club, and there made the acquaintance of almost all the celebrated artistes and scholars that, in St. Petersburg, among others, my diary mentions Clementi, his pupil, Field. Clementi, a man in his best years, of extremely lively disposition and very engaging manners, liked much to converse with me and often invited me after dinner to play at billiards. In the evening, I sometimes accompanied him to his large pianoforte warehouse, where Field was often obliged to play for hours, to display the instruments to the best advantage to the purchasers. I have still in recollection the figure of the pale overgrown youth, whom I have never seen since, when Field, who had outgrown his clothes, placed himself at the piano, stretched out his arms over the keyboard so that the sleeves shrunk up to nearly his elbows. His whole figure appeared awkward and stiff in the highest degree, but as soon as his touching instruments began, everything else was forgotten, and one became all ear. And happily, I could not express my emotion and thankfulness to the young man otherwise than by a silent pressure of the hand, for he spoke no other language but his mother tongue.
Field quickly gained popularity, performing at various salons and concerts, and received recognition for his unique approach to piano music. His pieces often incorporated elements of Russian folk melodies, which helped to solidify his connection with the local culture. This blending of styles contributed to the emergence of distinctively Russian piano tradition. The partnership between Clementi and Field was pivotal, as it not only fostered Field's development as an artist, but also facilitated the introduction of Western classical music into Russian society. The artistic exchange that took place during this period would have lasting implications for the evolution of Russian music, influencing future generations of composers and performers. Their collaborative efforts laid the groundwork for the rich tapestry of musical heritage that would define Russia in the years to come. John Field, an Irish-born composer and pianist, played an important role in shaping Russian musical culture during the early 19th century. Arriving in Russia as a young man, Field quickly became an integral part of the musical landscape, where his contributions resonated with both audiences and fellow musicians. His innovative approach to piano music, particularly through the creation of the nocturne, marked a significant departure from the classical traditions and laid the groundwork for the Romantic style that would flourish in the following decades. Field's style was characterized by its lyrical melodies and expressive nuances, which captivated Russian audiences. His nocturnes, imbued with a sense of poetic introspection, found a receptive audience in a society that was increasingly valuing emotional expressions in the arts. This alignment with the Russian aesthetic helped solidify his status as a beloved figure in the musical community, influencing contemporaries and future generations alike. Moreover, Field's pedagogical impact cannot be understated. As a teacher, he imparted his knowledge to a number of prominent Russian musicians, including Mikhail Glinka, who would go on to be a fundamental figure in Russian classical music. Field's emphasis on melodic beauty and refined technique shaped the educational landscape for pianists in Russia, promoting a style that balanced technical skills with emotional depth. Reflecting on the performance style of the Irish composer, Mikhail Glinka offered these remarks.
When I first arrived in Petersburg, I studied piano with the eminent Field, but unfortunately, I had taken only 3 lessons when he left for Moscow. Although I did not hear him very often, even now I will remember his vigorous yet sensitive and precise playing. It seemed to me that he did not actually strike the keys, but that his fingers simply fell as if they were raindrops scattering like pearls on velvet. Neither I nor any other sincere lover of the art of music can agree with Liszt, who once said in my presence that Field played languidly. No, Field's playing was often bold, erratic and varied, but he did not disfigure art like a charlatan, nor did he make mincemeat, as do most of the latest fashionable pianists.
As Russia entered a period of cultural awakening in the early 19th century, Field's contributions were instrumental in bridging the gap between Western classical traditions and the emerging Russian musical identity. His works were not only a testament to his talent, but also a reflection of the broader European influences on Russian music, fostering a unique synthesis that would characterize the national style. In essence, Field's legacy is deeply intertwined with the evolution of Russian musical culture, making him a central figure in a transformative era. In the early 19th century, the streets of St. Petersburg were awash with the new sounds of romantic music, among which the compositions of John Field stood out distinctly. Upon his arrival in Russia in 1802, Field rapidly ascended to prominence as a pianist and composer, captivating the city's elite with his lyrical miniatures and nocturnes. His music, brimming with emotional expressiveness, struck a chord with Russian audiences, mirroring their own cultural depth. Yet, despite his burgeoning fame and the warm embrace of his Russian patrons, Field harbored a profound longing for his native island. This nostalgia was not merely a sentimental longing, but was deeply intertwined with his identity as an artist. The haunting melodies and emotional richness of Irish musical traditions continued to resonate with him, shaping his compositions even as he navigated the cultural landscape of St. Petersburg. Field's music, while embodying the romantic zeitgeist, also carried unmistakable traces of his Irish heritage. The fusion of influences lent his work a unique sound, distinctively his own, yet resonant with the cultural heritage he held dear. As he navigated life in a foreign land, the dual nature of his existence, both celebrated and sultry, infused his work with rich depth. Throughout his career in Russia, John Field lived as the quintessential expatriate artist, successful yet always longing for the essence of Ireland. The enduring connection to his homeland enriched his art, allowing him to compose works that spoke not only to his experience in Russia, but also to the indelible link with the land he could never return to. This longing, a blend of personal and artistic elements, became a defining feature of his identity and his legacy in music. John Field's pedagogical influence on Russian piano art is significant, reflecting his exceptional artistry and unique teaching methodology. Renowned as a pianist and composer, Field's approach to teaching was deeply rooted in his own experiences as a performer. He prioritized the development of a singer-like quality in sound production, emphasizing the importance of nuance and expressiveness over mere technical prowess. John Field's tutelage was sought after by a diverse array of pupils, ranging from ambitious professionals to the social elite, all drawn to the opportunity to study under the famed maestro. His devoted student, Alexandre Dubuc, reflects on the revered instructor's demanding schedule and the unique atmosphere of his lessons.
He was paid 25 rubles for an out-of-town lesson and 10 and 15 for lessons at home. People chased after him because he did not want to give more than 4 out-of-town lessons a day. In wealthy homes, during lessons, they even set out a bottle of champagne for him, which he was very fond of. Whether Field's lessons were beneficial for underprepared students is another question.
Field's teaching methods were particularly challenging for novices, but highly effective for advanced pianists who were better able to grasp the subtleties of musical expression. Dubuc shares his personal experiences from years later, providing insight into the pedagogical approach that defined Field's legacy.
I began visiting Field 3 times a week and soon became deeply attached to him. Once, I had to figure everything out and think through things independently, but I must admit, I was well prepared for this by my previous teacher. The autonomy I was given only encouraged me to search for answers, and I never found it burdensome. All the effort and hard work was rewarded by Field's playing. When I was learning a piece, he would sit down and play it for me. That was worth more than any other explanation. With astonishing precision and clarity, I could see exactly what I was lacking and what I needed to strive for. What was more important was that he played himself and demonstrated the touch.
Field issued the mechanical approaches that dominated the teaching landscape of his time, such as the use of devices designed to increase finger speed and strength. Instead, he emphasized a more holistic approach to music, advocating for an understanding of artistic intent and emotional communication. This led to the development of his own exercises and etudes, which were crafted to refine the subtlety of touch and tonal variation. His lessons often included a repertoire that featured the music of classical composers alongside his own works, allowing students to engage deeply with a broad spectrum of musical styles. Field's legacy as a teacher is evident in the successful careers of his pupils, who carried forward his principles, enriching the world of piano music and ensuring that his influence resonated long after his time. Overall, Field's teaching was marked by a commitment to artistry and emotional expressiveness, established him as a pivotal role in the evolution of piano pedagogy. Alexander Bernard, the brother of the renowned music publisher Matvei Bernard, provided vivid recollections of John Field as both a teacher and a person. Alexander, who along with his brother took lessons from Field as an 8-year-old boy during the years 1824 to 1825, left behind these memories.
Field, upon seeing a little boy before him, initially refused to teach me. However, after I played Mozart's variations for him, he accepted me among his students. Field was a man of a beautiful soul, but exceedingly peculiar. For instance, he knew no other drink but champagne, and when I was thirsty, he would offer me a glass of champagne instead of water. He had 2 huge dogs, Sasha and Voltaire, both of whom would sit next to him at meals and eat from his plate. The account continues with Field's lengthy narrative of how Clementi, upon leaving the house, would tie him to the instrument. I was too young to fully appreciate the brilliance of his phenomenal playing, but all competent people agreed that no one had achieved such perfection in performance. And what patience he showed in mastering a passage. I often saw him place a box containing 100 tickets on the piano and tirelessly repeat the chosen spot until all were turned over twice. When I played, he would pace around the room, and at the slightest mistake, I had to start the piece from the beginning, even if it was near the end. Once tired from the constant repetitions from the first page, I asked him why he persistently said his usual recommendations after I seemingly played everything correctly. He replied, "Because you used the 3rd finger instead of the 4th. After 6 months of lessons with Field, I gave a concert in Moscow where I performed in his first concerto with the orchestra, and Field himself turned to the pages for me, and at the end, he kissed me."
In the early 19th century, Johann Wilhelm Gessler, and a decade later John Field, stood as the most fashionable music teachers in Moscow. The nobility of Russia, including distinguished families such as the Annenkov, Bertnevs, Lopukhins, Kropotkins, Tolstoys, and Vyazemskys deemed it a privilege to invite them into their homes. John Field, in particular, had a vast number of students, though many only took a few lessons, yet still claimed affiliation with his school. Among his students were future notable musicians such as Alexei Vostovsky, Ivan Laskovsky, Alexander Gurilov, Karl Mayer, Maria Szymanowska, Anton Konsky, Alexander Dubuque, and most famously, Mikhail Glinka. It is fair to say that Field left behind a pianistic school whose influence extended globally, enduring to the present day. We can trace several prominent lines through his legacy. Nikolai Rubinstein, founder of the Moscow Conservatoire, regarded himself as a proponent of Field's pianism. His teacher, Franz Gebel, adhered to the traditions of the renowned Irish musician. Rubinstein regularly included Field's nocturnes and his A-flat major concerto in his concert programs, for which he was only unfairly criticized by Tchaikovsky. However, the nocturnes of Field were also frequently performed by Rubinstein's elder brother. In 1866, Nikolai Rubinstein appointed Alexander Dubuque, a student of Field's in Moscow, to teach at the Moscow Conservatoire. Dubuque himself trained Nikolai Kashkin, Hermann Laroche, and Nikolai Zverev, the latter of whom was also greatly influenced by another of his teachers, Adolf Henselt. In a tapestry of the 19th century's musical landscape, John Field stands out as a figure of compelling contrast. His life, as much marked by artistic brilliance as by personal chaos, paints a vivid picture of a man whose genius was both celebrated and complicated by his eccentricities. French actress Louise Fusy, who lived in Moscow at the time, recalls,
Field was exceptionally witty, and his English accent, which he maintained in all its purity, along with a bit of awkward speech, lent a hilarious comedic effect to his original antics. His laziness and carefree attitude were such that attending social events where proper attire was required became a torment for him, especially since at the time trousers, boots, and coloured neckerchiefs were only appropriate for morning visits or casual gatherings. When Field went out in the evening, whether to a house concert or an event where his students performed, his stockings were perpetually wrinkled or worn inside out. The ends of his white necktie pointed one to the ceiling and the other to the ground. His vest was buttoned askew, and his hat perched atop his head like a fool's. But everyone had become so accustomed to his slovenliness that it went unnoticed. He set exorbitant prices for his lessons in hopes of deterring prospective students, yet his lessons were always in demand. Countess Orlova was one of his favourite pupils, not because she was the wealthiest, he cared little for that, but because she genuinely possessed musical talent. Moreover, with her, he was not obliged to dress up. She granted him complete freedom, knowing that this was the only way to ensure he attended regularly.
Known among friends and contemporaries for his charming yet absent-minded nature, Field was often seen as an enigmatic character, waving through life with a carefree disregard for social norms. Dubuque, who was Field's student in Moscow in 1820, remembers,
After his lessons, John Field would settle into his hired carriage along with his beloved companions, 4 large dogs, bearing classical names like Socrates, Herodotus, and the like, and head off to dine at a restaurant. Sometimes their carriage would proceed at a walking pace, while Field, seeking some exercise, would stroll alongside his canine entourage. It was during these outings that friends and acquaintances, eager for his company, would typically intercept him, hoping to spend the evening over a bottle of wine. The group would either visit Field's residence or head to a restaurant on Tverskaya Street. At these gatherings, the conversation was lively, but often lacked substance, meandering through various topics with only passing mentions of music. Field was spared the need to play or improvise, since there was no musical instruments present. At the evening's end, the restaurant owner would add the cost of the food and drink served to both the people and dogs to Field's tab, which was settled after his concerts. Thus, Field's life oscillated between dedicated teachings and boisterous socializing, a pattern that characterized his days.
Despite his success and acclaims as an artist, Field was notorious for his disheveled appearance, frequently arriving at concerts in mismatched socks and a haphazardly festooned waistcoat. Yet, it was his extraordinary talent that allowed those around him to overlook these peculiarities. His ability to captivate an audience with his lyrical performances made his personal quirks seem less significant, perhaps even enduring to some. Field's personal relationships were as complex as the melodies he composed. His marriage to Adelaide Percheron, gifted pianist who was once a student, was fraught with difficulties. Years later, Louise Fusy shared in her memoirs about the couple.
Despite his carefree nature and laziness, Field fell in his own way for a young woman named Percheron and married her. She, for her part, possessed an originality that was quite alluring, accompanied by the charms of youth. During the wedding, the groom suddenly remembered that he had forgotten both the wedding ring and the money. Immediately, guests scrambled to fetch the rings, and one of them provided the necessary funds. After the ceremony, we all gathered to dine at the newlyweds' apartment. Thus was completed this rather curious wedding.
Together, the couple, a son Adrian in 1819, who inherited his father's musical talents, but also witnessed the discord that shadowed their home. Despite the domestic turmoil, Field's personal life took another twist with the birth of an illegitimate son in 1815, Leon Charpentier, who later became a celebrated tenor known as Leon Leonov in the Russian opera scene. Despite these personal entanglements, Field remained with his wife Adelaide, reflecting the complicated layers of his private world. Lev Leonov, also known as Leon Charpentier, was accepted by the Imperial stage after his father's recommendations. He made his debut in 1833 and performed until the 1850s in theatres in Moscow and St. Petersburg. Unfortunately, he was not the best singer. Although singing in Glinka's operas, he often would get mixed reviews. Vasily Engelhardt wrote to musicologist Nikolai van Dyson.
How much Leonov, the tenor, resembled his father, but only in appearance, not in talent, because he was a poor singer with a poor voice and had a severe speech impediment.
In one of the reviews on Glinka's A Life for the Tsar, performances in spring 1836 in Moscow, you can find the following comments on Leonov's performance.
He certainly didn't thrill anyone, but he sang diligently, accurately, and sensibly, and for that he deserves a thank you.
Finally, famously in the midst of tenor Leonov's singing, Glinka would forcefully strike the piano keys, jump up from his stool, and start pacing the room, tilting his head back and tucking his fingers behind his vest. After calming down a bit, he would drink a glass of red wine, a bottle of which always stood behind his piano.
There's no emotion. His voice is wooden. If anyone is going to let me down, it's Leonov. Where strength of voice is needed, he croaks.
There is not much known about Adrian Field, except that he was also a pianist like his father. As his career progressed, Field's penchant for indulgence began to take a toll on his health. His fondness for the convivial company of fellow musicians and nights spent in the glow of artistic revelry contrasted sharply with the social expectations of a man of his standing. By 1819, Field was wealthy enough to decline the prestigious position of court pianist, a role that would have been conferred great honor, but perhaps constrained with his bohemian lifestyle. John Field's life, rich in contradiction, was a blend of public triumph and private challenges. His story, an important reminder of the complexities that often accompany creative genius, reflects the tumultuous existence of an artist whose personal trials were as intricate as the music he composed. This narrative, replete with the highs and lows of his career and personal life, illustrates the enduring impact of his work and the bittersweet symphony of his life. John Field, a seminal figure in the evolution of piano music during the early 19th century, captivated audiences across Europe with a blend of virtuosity and creative spirit, particularly in Russia, where his influence was profound. Field's concerts transcended typical performances. They were profound artistic experiences that showcased his exceptional skill and deep emotional connection. His body of work, especially his nocturnes and concertos, is distinguished by its lyrical melodies and intricate textures. Notably, his first piano concerto, composed at the tender age of 17, garnered widespread acclaim and solidified his reputation as a significant talent in London and subsequently in Russia. Field's playing style, characterized by a pristine lyrical quality, was described by the French pianist and composer Antoine Marmontel as possessing, quote, a sweet and tender feeling that few virtuosos can achieve. This nuanced approach not only highlighted his technical skill, but also his ability to resonate with audiences on an emotional plane, a style reminiscent of Frédéric Chopin. Indeed, in a letter dated 21st of November 1830, Chopin himself noted,
Klengel, when I played him my concerto, said that it reminded him of Field's playing and that I have a rare touch.
Field's improvisational skill further elevated his performances, as he seamlessly integrated spontaneous musical ideas, captivating his listeners with his genius. Throughout his illustrious career, Field graced many stages, often alongside other figures of his time, and was particularly celebrated in Russia. His concerts, though, not only attracted the cultural elite, but became significant cultural events in their own right, marking him as a master of musical communication and intimacy. Critical reviews of his time reflect the high esteem in which he was held. Countess Volkova, a maid of honor to Empress Maria Fedorovna, and a regular at Field's performances in Moscow, offered a poignant contrast between Field and another contemporary, Steibelt.
I heard in the Razumovskys' house Daniel Gottlieb Steibelt, which, however, by no means did not delight me. As for the performance, he is not worth even Field's little finger. Compared to the Irish pianist, he is a braggart, despises everybody, his face is unpleasant, and I did not like him at all. That's the impression I got from your best Petersburg artist.
John Field's innovative compositions, expressive performance style, and a profound connection with his audiences have cemented his place in the annals of classical music. His contributions have laid the groundwork for the Romantic piano repertoire, establishing him as a pivotal figure in the evolution of Western music and influencing generations of musicians. Moscow, located at the heart of the country, was significantly further from the western borders of the state than St. Petersburg. Due to the difficulties in communication, Western European touring artists visiting the northern Russian capital often did not reach the ancient capital. If they did, it was usually after the performances in St. Petersburg, thus depriving Muscovites of the pleasure of being the first to see and hear international stars. The programs of their concerts, which were covered in capital's press, were no longer a surprise by the time they reached Moscow. However, there were also notable advantages to this arrangement. Moscow audiences were well prepared and could compare their impressions with those of the St. Petersburg audience. Furthermore, until the railway between St. Petersburg and Moscow was built in 1851, artists from the two capitals also faced significant difficulties in traveling, and the cultural exchange between Russia's main cities was not as intense as necessary. In 1812, the acclaimed pianist and composer John Field made a transformative relocation to Moscow, a move that would profoundly influence his career trajectory. Having already established himself as a notable figure in the music scenes of London and Petersburg, Field found Moscow's artist environment exceptionally welcoming and conducive to his development. Arriving at the near age of 20, he quickly endeared himself to the city's music professionals. Moscow was not just a new geographical local for Field, it was a vibrant cultural hub where he could further refine his artistic voice. In his burgeoning community of musicians and enthusiasts, Field's emotive and melodic style found a resonant audience. His music, known for its lyrical beauty and emotional depth, appealed deeply to Russian sensibilities, aligning well with the audience's appreciation for nuanced and heartfelt musical expressions. Field's move to Moscow also intersected with significant cultural and historical shifts in Russia. During the early 19th century, the Napoleonic War stirred a sense of national pride and cultural introspection across the nation. Field's compositions, with their ability to intertwine Western musical influences with elements of the evolving Russian musical identity, offered a solace and reflection during these tumultuous times, capturing both audiences and critics. John Field resided at the corner of Tverskaya Street and Staropimenovsky Lane, almost directly opposite the English Club, which now serves as a museum. Merely crossing the road amidst two darkening troikas and the newly introduced stagecoaches, he would instantly find himself in the embrace of friends. Beyond the performances, Field also embraced the role of educator, imparting his expertise to the next generation of Russian pianists. His pedagogical effort can be a lasting impact, significantly shaping the musical landscape of Russia. Field's tenure in Moscow thus marked a pivotal period not only in his personal artistic journey, but also in the broader narrative of Russian classical music. His legacy in Moscow helped pave the way to the emergence of a distinct Russian musical voice, securing his place as a pivotal figure in the cultural history. John Field's final European tour marked an important chapter in his life, coloured by both artistic triumphs and personal struggle. In the late 1820s, Field embarked on a concert tour through major cities, receiving warm receptions for his unique piano style, which beautifully married lyrical melodies with intricate techniques. Despite the acclaim, Field was battling deteriorating health, a consequence of years of indulgence and excessive lifestyle. After a series of successful performances, Field returned to Russia in 1831, where his arrival was met with great enthusiasm from audiences and students alike. However, the toll of his health issues became increasingly apparent. He continued to teach and perform, but his physical ailments, later diagnosed as cancer, often overshadowed the joy of his music making. His performances, though still captivating, were tinged with a sense of urgency as he contended with his declining condition. Field's death on January 23, 1837 in Moscow was a profound shock to his admirers. He passed away surrounded by friends, including Fyodor Getgard, director and actor of the German theatre in St. Petersburg, who noted Field's remarkable composure even in the final moments. Field was laid to rest in Vedensky Cemetery, where a modest grave marks the final resting place of one of the most influential pianists of his time. The inscription on his tombstone celebrated his contributions to music, immortalizing him as a figure who profoundly affected the landscape of piano performance. Today, Field's legacy endures, and his grave serves as a reminder of his artistic genius and the emotional depth he brought to the world of music, echoing through the ages as a testament to his life and music. In his necrology, Field is remembered with all the love.
As a composer, Field did not quite match his own stature as a performer. It is true that he did not possess particular expertise in counterpoint, nor was he a skilled harmonist. However, his melodies were enchanting, and almost no one wrote such beautiful and peculiar passages for their instrument as Field did. For this, we will forever be grateful.